This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast Network. My name is Chris Blades, and before I get started here today, I want to make sure I remind you guys, as always, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast. Please make sure you never miss an episode. Please make sure you're always on top of when we drop our latest stuff. Also, if you could please as well give us a 5-star rating, nice review wherever you watch your podcast. Be very appreciated, very helpful. Love to see what you guys like, what you guys dislike, the ways you can improve, all that fun stuff. And also, if you're on social media, we're on social media. You can find us there: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We can talk, we can chat, we can debate, we can discuss. And I mean, the season in the MLB isn't like that much closer to happening, but like at least they're back talking now, so that's fun. On the last podcast, we talked about how Commissioner Rob Manfred said that he wasn't sure if there was going to be any baseball at all, and then since then they've had two proposals, one from the MLB side and one from the player side. I mean, obviously both have been rejected, but at least they're talking. Because that means, in theory, something will eventually come. Obviously, it hasn't happened yet, which is a complete, like I said, as we already talked about, that's already a disaster in and of itself. But at least there's some negotiations again, so in theory, they're getting closer. So, where we're at now is that the MLB Players Association on Thursday proposed a 70-game regular season, a plan immediately rejected by MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred. I mean, it is what it is, but like at least, like I said, they're at that point before they weren't even at that point. In a statement announcing the counter-proposal, which included expanded playoffs for 2020 and 2021, MLBPA Executive Director Tony Clark said, "We believe this offer represents the basis of an agreement on a resumption of play." Sources told ESPN's Jeff Passan that among the details in the MLBPA's proposal included a 70-game regular season from July 19th through September 30th, full prorated pay, spring training to begin June 26th through 28th, expanded playoffs to 16 teams in 2020 and 2021, minimum pool for playoff salaries in 2020 based on rounds played, $50 million if full playoff is staged, 50-50 split of incremental TV revenue for additional postseason games in 2021, salary advance forgiveness for all players in tiers 1 to 3 of March agreement, opt-outs, full service and salary for players who are high risk and those who live with high risk individuals, $10 million for social justice initiatives funded from their welfare plan, $50 million to be transferred from joint funds to the commissioner's discretionary fund. Clubs are granted permission to sell advertisement patches on uniforms in 2020 2021, enhanced housing allowances in spring training and regular season, universal designated hitter, this was one of the big talking points, the universal designated hitter in 2020 and 2021, parties to collaborate on broadcast enhancements and mutual waiver of potential grievances under the March agreement. In retort to that, the commissioner said that this needs to be over. Until I speak with owners, I can't give a firm deadline. Following a 4-hour negotiation in Phoenix between Clark and Manfred on Tuesday, MLB emerged believing that the framework of a deal had been agreed upon. MLB proposals Wednesday include a 60-game season and full prorated salaries. We have a list of issues. We stated positions on each of those. We then made trades and compromises across the board. Blah blah blah. At several points in time, I went back to the list of issues with Tony and reviewed where we were, and I did that again at the end of the meeting. We shook hands and we both agreed we were going to push our sides to reach an agreement consistent with that framework. The union disagreed with that accounting, and players Wednesday said they viewed MLB's proposed 60-game season as too short. In my discussions with Rob in Arizona, we explored a potential prorater framework, but I made clear repeatedly in the meeting that, and after it, that there was a number of significant issues with what was proposed, in particular the number of games. It is unequivocally false to suggest that any tentative agreement or other agreement was reached in that meeting. So yeah, just a lot of he said stuff back and forth. Manfred said also, I told him 70 games was simply impossible given the schedule and the public health situation, and he went ahead and made that proposal anyway. Both the MLB and the union proposed starting the season on July 19th, and players said it should end September 30th, 3 days later than management. Citing Dr. Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, MLB does not want to extend play deeper into autumn. But, I mean, it's 3 days later, so that's, like, whatever. But, yes, Dr. Fauci also was on record for saying that football shouldn't be played if there's not a bubble, which, that might actually be a fair point, but that's neither here nor is it there. So, again, he's not just talking about the MLB specifically. MLB also does not want to bunch more games into the same time period. He doesn't want people playing doubleheaders, and because apparently the public health guys told us that we shouldn't put that many people together for that many hours at a time. It's not safe, which, in fairness, does make a little bit of sense. And as always, absent a deal, the league has the ability to implement a season of its desired length, likely 50 games per the March 26th agreement. So, like I said, this is all on ESPN or other sites if you want to read up on it in full or just read other opinions on it. But like I was saying, it sounds, at least for the happiness of MLB fans, that they're getting closer on a deal. Not that they're there yet, because obviously they're not. But at least they're getting closer and they're back discussing things and talking. They're back to the table, I guess you could say. And that's good, just because before it was like, now there's going to be nothing, and that would have been a disaster for both sides, just to not be able to get anything worked out. But at least now, they should be able to get something. I understand from the player's perspective why they want to play more games, because, it's their season, it's their livelihood. I could see why they would be more willing and wanting to play more games. Like they said, they just want to play games. It is what it is. But at the same time, from the owner's perspective, and I guess the league's perspective, I should say too, I could also understand to a degree the belief that you don't want to play too many games in a short period of time, because then that's not safe. Which I do get from that part too, just because, like Manfred pointed out, people shouldn't be together for a long period of time again as this is continuing to go on. Unless, again, there's ways in which you could be safe. It's not people are going to be out there wearing masks and stuff. So the less times you have to, or less teams you have to have interacting with each other on a given day, the better. So you don't want to play too many doubleheaders, stuff like that. But I don't know. I didn't think that 10 more games would be like that big of a difference. Like, again, we don't, not exactly sure how the schedule would work, or even how many games there were technically supposed to be for most teams between, July 19th to September 30th. But I didn't think 10 more games would mean that many more doubleheaders. But hey, I don't know. I think it's just them being annoying. So, like I said, set it at 64, 65. Because you're not even going to get to half the season. So yeah, set it at 64 if you don't want to do an odd number. And I think both sides should be relatively okay with that. Just because, like I said, at this point it's already bad the way this is played out in public up to this point. The fact that they are really the only major sports league without any sort of return to play plan, and we're already nearing not nearing the end, but yeah. There's only 10 days left. Like I said, we're getting close to July, and that means if you are going to return, you should be returning sometime soon. You would think, at least, but like we've been saying, they don't have a plan, which is bad in and of itself, and a lot of this comes down to money, which only makes things worse. Because it's not necessarily. I try to always be on the player's side when their side warrants someone being on their side. But it's like, obviously it comes down to the owners not wanting to pay more. I mean, at least they gave them the full pro-rated salaries in this newest proposal, but still, it's only 60 games, not really like that much. It's not even, like I said, it's not even half of their pay. 60 games is what, like a little over, like a third? I mean, let me actually do the exact math for you just so we could get. So 60 games would be 37% of their salary. So not even, like I said, not even 40. Like it's not really that big of a chunk of their salary that you're even giving them for the season. Granted, you're paying them for the games that you're playing, so I get that. But like I said, to bump it up a little bit, I don't see why it should be that big of a deal. Especially since it seems like they were only going to end 3 days later than the original. Well, not the original, but the most recent proposal from the MLB. I think if you add those 3 days, bump it up to like 62, 63 games or something, I don't see why it would be an issue. Like they don't even have their official like where they're going to play these games. It's not like they haven't really determined like is it a bubble situation or you flying different states, which you shouldn't be because again, states cases are spiking. So yes, they haven't figured that out. They haven't figured out their health protocol, they have so much stuff to figure out outside of just coming back. That the fact they haven't even figured out the coming back part is bad enough. But you would think we'll have some sort of not ultimatum, but just like some sort of decision on this sooner rather than later. Because it's like at this point, like what are you like? How are both sides? And this is why I'll get off the player side a little bit. Like they should know at this point, brothers don't have to compromise. You got to accept something like, look, not everything's going to be perfect. It is what it is. And both sides have to be willing to compromise. And I think that's probably why they went to 70, so you can meet somewhere in the middle. Just get it to 64, 65 games and call it a day. Like, if they offer that and, like, if someone offers that and then the sides don't agree, like, that's, all right, then maybe there really won't be baseball this season. Would you just think at this point when you're fighting over, like, trying to squeeze every dime, every dollar out of somebody when, again, millions of people currently are unemployed, and even with that, you still have people that may be employed, but then like they're not. Maybe they're not necessarily in the best financial shape because of other things, or maybe they're not getting as much because they're not working as many hours. Like there's a lot of different things happening with people in the country that are dealing with a lot less money than baseball players and owners are dealing with. So that the fact that they can't even come to an agreement on that at some point, I understand it's a negotiation, so you're not going to agree on the first offer, but it shouldn't have taken this long. Again, I mean, they still could come back earlier than the NBA, which, I mean, should have never been a question. Like, the MLB should have been able to come back sooner than the NBA. It always should have, but, like, the fact that they don't even have the plan in place now is still, like, kind of a mess. Especially when, again, if you're with this recent proposal, they're talking about starting spring training, next Friday? So I understand like the guys are ready to go whenever and everything like that, but like still you can't just. I would like to think you're going to give these guys at least a week in advance to get ready. Instead of you're not just going to tell them on Tuesday like, "Hey, be here on Friday." Like that doesn't seem right. Even the NBA gave their guys a couple of weeks to get it together, get everything together, get everything in order to make sure you're all good with everything before they have to go on out there. So I don't know. It is like this whole MLB thing has just been kind of weird, but at least it seems as if they should be relatively close on a deal, which if you're a baseball fan, that's good news, I suppose. I know, most baseball fans are tired. Everybody's really tired of these negotiations at this point, but just like, especially it's just that baseball, just figure it out. It shouldn't be this hard at this point. It should not be that hard. You've had enough negotiations. Just figure something out. But I guess you could have said this. You could have said the same thing about the Jets and Jamal Adams. But clearly, those are another two sides where things just don't seem like they're going to work itself out. So yeah, Jamal Adams demanded a trade today. So we'll talk about that. Talk about how we got to this point, and also talk about the 7 teams he had on the list of teams he would be willing to be traded to, and which teams might be the best fit or most likely fit. I don't want to say best because anybody can use a Pro Bowl, all-pro caliber safety, but most likely fits. So we'll discuss all of that right after the break. Stay right there.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Podcast Network. So yeah, the Jets, arguably, probably their best player. I'm trying to think. Yeah, no, I mean, Jets fans out there, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like I can. I'll stick pretty confident because Sam hasn't shown enough yet. Le'Veon too, but Le'Veon wasn't really that great last year, so maybe you would say overall like Le'Veon, but like. As of right now, I would say Jamal Adams is their best player. And apparently he doesn't want to be a Jet anymore. So, that's great. Well, I guess great for him, ? Not so great for the Jets. Depends on, I guess, where he ends up. But yeah, so, as I said, frustrated with contract negotiations, New York Jets safety Jamal Adams has informed the team he wants a trade. A source told ESPN, this is all from an ESPN article about this. Rich Samini. A source told ESPN's Adam Schefter that Adams would welcome a team to one of 7 teams. A welcome a trade, to one of 7 teams. The Ravens, Cowboys, Texans, Kansas City, Eagles, Niners, and Seahawks. The Jets apparently have no intention of trading him, but Adams could try to force their hand by being disruptive and staging a training camp holdout. He is upset because he feels like the team is dragging its feet, sources said. The trade demand comes after he hinted earlier Thursday on social media that he may want to be traded. Responding to a comment on Instagram, Adams concluded a long rant by saying, "Maybe it's time to move on!" 6 days ago, Adams, again on Instagram, accused the Jets of a lot of talk and no action. He said he still hadn't received a contract proposal that was promised in January. Adams is signed through the 2021 season, but he made it clear he wants a new contract by the start of the regular season. The Jets have said they want to make him a Jet for life, but have given no indication publicly of whether they are amiable to a deal. Amiable, I think. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Whatever. To a deal before the season. The Jets entertained offers for Adams at the trade deadline last fall, with the Cowboys showing interest. The Jets asking the price reportedly was a first-round pick and 2 second-rounders. Obviously, he wasn't traded, but it is what it is. Adams was irked because he felt management has misled him into believing he was untouchable. This was obviously before the trade talks. And also from his own draft class, he's seen Christian McCaffrey get paid. Myles Garrett, Mahomes is probably set to get paid. And obviously he's been one of the better defensive backs since he entered the league in 2017. He has the most sacks, that's all according to ESPN stats and information. Most sacks, second most forced fumbles, 3rd most snaps played, and 5th most tackles. And apparently he also has the most sacks by any DB in his first 3 seasons with 12 since the stat became official in 1982. So, yeah. Oh, just lastly, Adams wants to become the highest paid safety in the NFL. Sources said, meaning he would like to eclipse the $14.6 million per year the Chicago Bears gave Eddie Jackson. Also, sources also believe He was seeking to become the highest paid player on the Jets. That distinction belongs to C.J. Mosley at $17 million per year, although he was an unrestricted free agent when the deal was signed. I don't think Adams was getting that much, but he could get more than Eddie Jackson money, in theory, because that's normally how these things go. But for all sides, I guess outside of Jamal Adams, this is bad. Even kind of on Jamal Adams' side, this is a little bad. So, for the Jets aspect of it, never at all do you want your best player, one of your best players, or the best player at a key position. I mean, safety's not like that key position, but I mean, it's becoming more important now because safeties have to be more versatile. They can't just be a free safety or just be a box safety. They have to be able to move around, cover tight ends, blitz, play in the slot, play in open space. Like, they got to be able to do a little bit of everything. And Jamal Adams can do that. So, when you have players like that, you have them on your roster, you draft them, and then you get to finish year 3, and that's when the contract negotiations can start. And there, at least Jamal Adams is, according to his side of the story, there have been no contract negotiations. They haven't sent him a deal. They haven't tried to negotiate with him since January when they promised they would. After already potentially floating him, though they obviously didn't trade him, but they floated his name out there in trade talks around the trade deadline, with the Cowboys obviously showing a lot of interest. And there was also, according to Jamal Adams, he was led to believe at that time that he was one of the untouchable players on the Jets. And again, was he traded? No. But when you give off the perception that a person's untouchable, and then that kind of is reeled back a little bit when you make them available on the trade market, it can send an interesting message to the player from the organization side. And in Joe Douglas's really, because again, he came from Philly, he was in Baltimore before, like he hasn't really been on his own, he's just kind of been like the second or third or wherever guy on the totem pole. This was like his first real big shot, and this is really like the first real thing he had to do, because he didn't do the draft last year, he didn't sign the free agents last year, which is like a different story. I don't know why the Jets did that, but whatever, I don't know why he accepted the job that for a team that he hadn't really had any hand in picking, but it is what it is. So this was going to be like his first big test, you could say, outside like the draft and free agency this past season, which, I mean, by all intents and purposes, everybody claims that he had a good draft. Again, we'll see when it all kind of plays out, but on paper, at least, he had a good draft. But yes, then you come down, you knew this negotiation was coming up. So when you come to the team, you would think you need to have a conversation with Jamal Adams, like, look, this is where, like, when the time comes, we'll start talking. We want you to be here. We want you to be a lifelong Jet. We'll prove that to you, and then, like, obviously, when the time comes, prove it to him. From, like I said, it seems like at least Jamal Adams feels as if they haven't done that, which is bad on Joe Douglas's part, because now it's like, how can other players trust you on the team? Like, if you're not willing to pay Jamal Adams, who's arguably one of the better players at his own position, how do I expect outside of Sam Darnold, because the quarterback's going to get paid. But even, Sam Darnold wasn't Joe Douglas wasn't here when they drafted him. We don't know what his opinions are on Sam Darnold. I would imagine he has to like him at least a little bit. You wouldn't take him the job otherwise. But, yeah, so same thing on that. If I'm anybody, who else is? I'm trying to think if there's any other young guys that's up for deals. They didn't re-sign Robbie Anderson, even though he's been good for them. It sends whatever message you wanted to send. Traded Leonard Williams. So there's that. Didn't pay either of those guys. Not even like big money, just any money at all. I know some talks about Le'Veon and whether he was going to be on the team or not. He's still there for now, but again, we'll see. It's just like when you're a young guy coming up, or even like a veteran-ish guy coming up, and you're like, oh, I know my deal's coming up soon, and then you see what's happening with Jamal Adams, you're like, whoa, okay, hold on, how do I trust them to negotiate in good faith? And that's not the perception you should want around the league or around the locker room, to be like, hey, Joe Douglas, he's not a stand-up guy. He'll say you do one thing and then doesn't do it. So, like I said, we don't know the negotiations, we don't know what is true and isn't true, but as of right now, Jamal Adams is the only one that's talking, so we have his side of the story. and that's what we can discuss. So like I said, just from the Jets side, it's bad. But though, again, I get the whole, like, he's under contract for 2 more years with the 5th-year option stuff. And they also, I guess, they have the franchise tag, so even, like, 3 more years before they have to give him an extension. But it's just one of those things where it's like, all right, if a guy outperforms his rookie contract, that's kind of what happens. Now, again, they don't have to give it to him. But if you don't even start to negotiate, like, if you don't even, like, say, like, hey, look, this is the number we think you're worth. If they haven't even gotten to that point, then that's a red flag when we're talking about it's almost going to be July soon. And nothing, supposedly? No contract offer, no negotiations started, nothing? Like, that's, like I said, from that aspect of it, from the Jets, that's a bad look. Though, again, I can understand why they're like, look, there's no rush on this. We have you for 2 more years. But also, from Jamal Adams' perspective, if I'm on a bad team, like, this is my incentive to want to stay on this bad team, because I know when they talked about him being traded, he didn't say that he was going to, I mean, obviously he wants to get paid, but he wasn't necessarily going to maybe ask that big money right away, because who knows how everybody's contract, their cap situations are looking. So it's one of those things where he'd be like, hey, look, I'll get traded to the Cowboys or the Chiefs or whoever, but, like, all right, I'll maybe, like, play there first, and then, like, after the season we can start negotiations. So not everybody, or not every situation, you have to have a deal in place before the trade goes down. But, I mean, that's the thing. When you're in a position where you think you can win, all right, then maybe you're willing to wait on the negotiation. But if you're on a bad team, and the team's been bad all 3 of his years there, though he's been good, but the team's been bad, he's like, all right, well, if we're going to be bad, at least let me get my money. Because if I'm putting myself on the line out there, risking injury every game, because that's basically what NFL players do, at least let me get paid for it. And, I mean, get paid at the level I should be getting paid at, and that's what he's not. So I can see why he's like, hey, look, I've outperformed my contract. I've been great. The team hasn't been great, but that's not on me. At least let me get compensated for that. And the Jets are like, it's about that. And then, like I said, that's where we are. But going back to those 7 teams real quick that he wants to get offered to, I mean, I don't understand why the Eagles are always on these trade talks with these big guys. I mean, I understand Harry Roseman's the guy that calls everybody about everybody. Literally, apparently, they were in on Hopkins. They were in on a couple different guys. They were in on Jalen Ramsey before. They've been in on guys. But at the same time, they very rarely make the big deal. I mean, Darius Slay is probably, like, the biggest name they traded for, honestly. And even he was on, like, the last year of his deal, and they ended up signing him to big money. So a little bit different situation. Didn't trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick. Like, they're not normally the guy that are going to make that big splashy trade, per se. Even, like, they traded, Darius Slay for a 3rd and a 5th. Like, they didn't even have to give up any premium picks, really. So, I don't think them, and plus their cap situation is rough in the next few years. So, I don't think they can really afford it. Though, fit-wise, it'd make total sense. But, I don't think they can afford it. So, the teams, I think, could actually make a bit of sense is the Ravens. Just because I know that I think Chuck Clark was the guy that filled in for Tony Jefferson, I believe, when he got hurt. And he played well, but again, Jamal Adams, no offense to Chuck Clark, is better than him. And also, like, Earl Thomas, you don't know how many more seasons he got left. And he kind of just like, all right, you can, not that they do the same things, but at least Earl Thomas, Jamal Adams, Chuck Clark, that's a nice three safety rotation kind of situation. So that makes sense, and plus I think they can probably afford it to a degree. And plus, like, again, you have to save money here and there because you got to pay Lamar Jackson eventually. But I think they should probably have the money to be able to make it work, and also that makes their defense that much better. The Cowboys obviously make sense, but when you haven't paid the quarterback, it's hard for me to believe you're going to pay the safety. So, and they had a chance to trade for him before and didn't, so it's like, how many times are you going to go through this song and dance with the same team? That seems kind of weird. Texans don't have any picks, and they literally just traded DeAndre because they didn't want to pay him, so I don't know how that's going to work. But yeah, they don't have any like first, second round picks, I think, in the next draft, so I don't know. And like DeAndre Hopkins is the best player, is their best asset, so I don't know who they would be giving up for him. But maybe that's just me. Chiefs is an interesting one because they have Chris Jones, I believe, on the franchise tag. and they don't necessarily want to pay him because no one really wants to give big money to defensive tackles. So, but then also, like, would they just trade for him with Quinnen Williams there? But Quinnen Williams also wasn't that good last year, so I don't know. But that'd be interesting one, just like a nice swap. Though, I mean, they have Tyrann Mathieu, they have Juan Thornhill, who they drafted, who ended up getting hurt. Like, they don't really need a safety that bad, but hey, could work. Niners, interesting one, because they just didn't pay DeForest Buckner, but then traded a first-round pick for him, which again they used for Javon Kinlaw. But they just didn't trade Buckner, so it's like, oh, you're going to pay him, but not him. A little interesting, but that is what it is. But yeah, so you have them. Then obviously they could use. I mean, their safeties aren't anything like great. They're not bad, but they're not like big names. I think it was like Jimmy Ward, and I forget who the other safety was. But it's not that they're not like big names. Jamal Adams would step in and be the best safety. I mean, they still have Richard Sherman in the secondary. They have good linebackers with Fred Warner, Quan Alexander, Dre Greenlaw. I think stepped in good for them last year. And then obviously the front four is the front four. So that one, that's an interesting one. I think that's a sneaky one that could potentially work out. And plus since they think they're going to be good, so like trading a back half of the first round pick for an all-pro caliber safety, I would do that every day of the week and twice on Sundays. And then lastly, the Seahawks, again, they're in a situation where they don't want to pay Jadeveon Clowney, so that's a little interesting, though. I mean, it doesn't mean they're not going to resign him, they just don't want to pay him big money. And I don't know what their cap situation is necessarily, but they're probably trying to look for that next guy in the secondary. I mean, they got good play out of their secondary last year once they traded for Quandre Diggs. And also they have good corners in Trey Flowers and Shaquem, or I think it's Shaquem Griffin. I know it's the other of the two twins. No, not the pass rusher. I think it's you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, so they have the good secondary pieces, but obviously Jamal Adams, because you saw what a good safety did for them, because they were kind of missing that before Quandre Diggs got there, and Jamal Adams is better than Quandre Diggs. So those I mean, like I said, Ravens make sense. Texans are probably out. Eagles are probably out. Kansas City, I don't think they need him but I mean, hey, why not trade for him? So I'm going to rank them. I'd probably go like Baltimore 1, Dallas 2, Niners 3, and then like Kansas City, Seattle like 4. Like I said, then Texans and Eagles behind that. Houston just because he wants to play in Texas, and then Eagles because they're a good team. But like neither of them, I think, have the pieces in order to trade for him. But again, we'll see how that all plays out. And even if he's traded, he might not even end up getting traded in the long run. But we shall see how that goes. But yeah, so after we come back here, we're going to discuss college sports again. And I told you, now that players understand their power and the authority they have, they're gonna exercise it. And well, I'm not to say that necessarily like this was all coming from the players, but now with the racial tensions and everything that's going on in the country, adjustments are having to be made, or changes are having to be made. And they're happening in the real world, and they're happening in college sports as well. So a couple schools are having to make some adjustments to their flags or fight songs, different things, if they want to stay in the good graces of their black players. So we will discuss those colleges and those changes right after this break. So stay right there.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
are back here again on the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast. So in a surprising move, not necessarily surprising that it happened, just surprising that it kind of came out of nowhere. But yeah, so in a surprising move to a degree, SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey threatened to not host any future conference championship events in Mississippi until the state changes its flag. Mississippi is the only state that still has a Confederate symbol and blue cross with 13 stars on its flag. It is past time for change to be made to the flag of the state of Mississippi. Sankey said in a statement, "Our students deserve an opportunity to learn and compete in environments that are inclusive and welcoming to all. In the event there is no change, there will be consideration of precluding Southeastern Conference Championship events from being conducted in the state of Mississippi until the flag is changed." The SEC last ran a championship event in Mississippi in May 2016 when Mississippi State hosted the softball tournament in Starkville. The NCAA already banned any of its predetermined postseason events from being held in Mississippi because of the flag. In 2001, Mississippians voted in a referendum to keep the current flag, but this week, in the wake of national protests against racism, Mississippi legislators again proposed a bill that would remove the Confederate symbol from the flag. Several state universities, including Mississippi and Ole Miss, stopped flying the flag in 2016, and Mississippi State President Mark Keenum issued a statement shortly after Sankey's comments on Thursday, saying he understood the commissioner's position. He also said that the national climate is such that this debate may produce unintended consequences for our student athletes here at Mississippi State University and those at the University of Mississippi. Keenum said, in addition, there will be similar unintended consequences for academic pursuits of all our state's public universities and negative economic impacts on the state's communities as well. Since 2015, a lot of people have firmly been on record in support of changing the state flag. I have reiterated that view to our state leaders on multiple occasions, including during face-to-face discussions in recent days and hours. On June 12th, I wrote to the governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker of the Mississippi House, reaffirming that support. The letter said, in part, that our flag should be unifying, not a symbol that divides us. I emphasized that it is time for a renewed, respectful debate on this issue. Ole Miss Chancellor and Vice Chancellor also put out a statement. They said the University of Mississippi community concluded years ago that the Confederate battle flag did not represent many of our core values, blah, blah, blah. In 2016, the university stopped flying the flag. Mississippi needs a flag that represents the qualities of our state that unites us, not those that divide us, and we support the SEC's decision. So, yeah, like I said, not surprising that we got to this point because, again, Confederate stuff, it's a no-go now. I mean, it should have been a no-go a while ago because, I mean, you can say what you want. I'm not from the South, so, also I'm not white, but I'm not from the South, and I don't have any connection to that flag other than it being a symbol of a side that was willing to fight in, not necessarily only in support of slavery, but just in support of slavery as one of its reasons. In the Civil War. That's all I know about it. And as a black person, that's a no-go for me. Anytime I see it, anytime I'm around it, anytime I see anybody with it, I'm just like, all right, this is not the place that I need to be at. Again, every teach their own, but that's not the place where I need to be at. But yeah, just so in lieu of everything that's happening in the world right now, and people like asking for things to be renamed and asking for Confederate statues to get taken down, I mean, I didn't even know Mississippi still had the Confederate symbol on their flag, but, I mean, they had to know this day was coming. Once all that stuff started, you're like, oh, okay, we're going to have to go back to the drawing board on this one, because, like, how could you, like, what is that about? And, hey, if you don't want to change it, cool, you're just going to lose out on all those SEC, all that SEC money, which I imagine no one is going to want, so they'll end up changing it, but it's just like, yeah, I mean, why in 2020 you still need that is beyond me. I understand, like, they claim it's, like, heritage, not hate, or whatever. I know it's your thing of Southern pride, but, again, don't really know why. Because, like, they also lost the war. I'm not to make it, like, a whole history thing, but it's just, like, don't really know what the pride is in the flag, personally. Now, again, maybe if I was of a different race or from the South, I would understand it better. But as a person from New Jersey, don't really understand the connection to it. But maybe that's just me. Like I said, it was bound to happen. People were going to, it was going, whether somebody said something or didn't say something, whether it was commissioner or players or whoever. Again, they stopped flying the flag. Most of the universities did in 2016, so that was a big enough step. But again, that's not, just stop flying it is one thing, but you're still going to need to like do something with it. Like, why do they still have Confederate symbols on their flag in 2020? It's even necessary to me. And again, I don't know what the name of all their buildings are, the name of what kind of statues they may or may not have up. That those things may be next to come down at these respective schools in Mississippi, but the flag, it clearly needs to go. That just seems like a given at this point. And speaking of things that need to go, apparently they're also trying to make sure that Florida puts an end to their gator bait cheer and band performance due to the racist history of the term. So this also came out today. The University of Florida will no longer allow its gator bait cheer at sporting events because of the historic racist imagery associated with the phrase. School president Kent Fuchs, I don't know, that's the last name, whatever, announced Thursday. I don't pronounce it wrong. And have it be disrespectful. As part of the university-wide review to help the school take steps against racism, the president highlighted the cheer as an action that will be taken immediately. While I know of no evidence of racism associated with our gator bait cheer at UF sporting events, this is a horrific, historic, racist imagery associated with the phrase. Accordingly, university athletics and the gator band will discontinue the use of the cheer. When the band strikes up the familiar tune at sporting events, fans respond with a chomping motion with their arms and shout "Gator bait." African American babies were used as alligator bait, according to the Jim Crow Museum of Racist Memorabilia at Ferris State University, citing newspaper articles and imagery from the late 1800s and early 20th century. The term alligator bait was also used as a racial slur against African Americans. So yeah, not gonna work at all. Lawrence Wright, who popularized the phrase, "If you ain't a gator, you're gator bait baby," after saying it following a win over Florida State in 1995, told the Gainesville Sun he was upset with the decision to remove the cheer and wants to, what? Okay, well, hold on, we'll get to that in a second. And wants to talk with the president. "I'm not going for it," the former safety told the Sun. "I created something for us. It's a college football thing. It's not a racist thing. It's about us, the Gator Nation, and I'm black. What about our history as the Gator Nation? We took a program from the top 5 to number 1 in the country. I think I've done enough. Put in the blood, put in the sweat and tears to get to offer my opinion about something like this." Okay, we'll attack that right there. It's Lawrence Wright, fellow. Don't know who you are, excuse me. But again, I'm not a Florida fan, so that's probably why. Shout out to you, I guess, for making it popular, but what does that matter? Honestly, one, it's not like your chant, like you didn't you didn't come up with the words. It was already a thing, but you just obviously said it on national TV or said it following a win over Florida State. So again, you're trying to take credit for it, but again, that is completely irrelevant. If the history of the term is racist, why would you want to continue, and why would you want that continually associated with the school that you claim to care so much about? That doesn't make any sense. Black, white, whoever. It wouldn't matter who came up with the phrase like that. If it's racist, it's racist. That has no inclination at all. I don't know why. Knowing the history of it, or even if you didn't know before you said it, you now are aware of the history of it, you would still be like, yeah, no, that's the thing we should want associated with our school. The chant that stemmed from using black babies as bait for alligators. Why would you want that? Especially as an African American. That makes zero sense to me. At all. But that's, again, a separate point. Not everybody's on the same page with all this stuff. Just part of the problem. That's neither here nor is it there. Good for Florida, though, on their side of things. Good for them, though. As with like, again, with this and with the Mississippi thing and with the taking down Confederate statues and all these other things, or NASCAR saying don't fly it at the races and stuff like that, it's all great, cool, but, like, you knew it was bad before. Like, this stuff should have already been in the process of being taken down. As like you said, Mississippi, it's like the university has already stopped flying the flag on their campuses in 2016. Why was it not changed then? Again, I guess they had to put it to a vote and it got voted down, but, like, it should have been changed then. Like, there was no reason to keep it then. Now, again, it's better to do this than to just leave it up, because that would make it worse. But you have to, it's nice to see, to a degree, it's nice to see these things put in motion, but, like, if this history about the flag is readily available, so that should have already been gone, unless you want that associated with your school. If that's what you want associated with your school, hey, more power to you. That's just your prerogative. And that's not something I would want associated with my school. That's just me. But when it comes to that chant, like, once anybody knew about the history, you have to ixnay that. You have to. I mean, you have a lot of, you're facing a lot of African American players. You have a lot of African American players on your own team. That's not the kind of chant I would want to be expressing or using or being associated with my school if I didn't want to appear racist. Now, if you want to appear racist, that's a different story. More, like I said, more power to you. But if I didn't want to appear that, I wanted to appear on the right side of this, like, that had to get stopped immediately. So I'm surprised if this history was readily available at different universities and museums and stuff, that once anybody found that out, we're like, hey, we got to do something about this chant that we're doing. But again, it's now's the time where people are waking up, which is, like I said, better late than never, but never late is better. Shout out to Drake. But yeah, like I said, it's great that people are at least starting to realize the issues now, because if this hadn't happened, if all this stuff hadn't been going on in this world, who knows when this would have been stopped. And this should have been stopped, like I said, years ago, just like the Mississippi should have changed their flags and statues and things should have been renamed way before now, but at least they're getting changed. So now we can make steps, and this is not necessarily going to stop systemic racism in this country, but at least we're moving toward, we don't have to continuously see people that help perpetuate it throughout the history of this country. If you can eradicate that, and again, people are saying you're erasing history, blah, blah, blah. The history is still in history books. You can still look it up. You can still find it. You're just not commemorating it. Because that's what statues are, that's what plaques are, that's what songs are, that's what flags are. They commemorate and honor things. These are not people or things you should want to honor. At least in my opinion. Everyone has their own opinion. But those are not things you should want to honor. And you can, like I said, the history is still there. It's not getting erased out of any books. You'll still be able to find it if you want to look for it. I mean, the internet is your friend. But there's no reason to commemorate these things, like I said, with flags or chants or statues or whatever. Just, we should be getting rid of those things in our country, in my opinion. So, at least it's nice to see that people are making the necessary steps towards a more inclusive country. Because that's what America claims to be, in this great melting pot. Everybody's equal, everyone has a chance at the American dream, blah, blah, blah. That's not what it is. At least unless you're a white male. If you're a white male, this country, great for you. Everybody else, well, also I guess if you're a straight white male, let me say that, because the gay white man, once they find out you're gay, it could be it's not as easy for you. But if you're a straight white male, you're good to go in this country. Everybody else, you got at least some hills to climb. Some have more hills than others, but you have some hills to climb. So it's nice to see at least we as a country and in all aspects of sports and society are making steps towards being more inclusive and being more equal and creating a better society for everyone, where everyone feels welcome, because that's how it should be, in my opinion. So good for Mississippi, good for the SEC, and good for the SEC. The Mississippi hasn't done anything yet. Good for the SEC, and good for University of Florida. Get those things done, because they needed to be done. Speaking of things being done, Ohio State and Alabama are set to play each other. Granted, way far down the line, but they're set to do a 1-1, like a home and away series type of thing. And it got me thinking of what other teams would kind of use that same big name 1-1 series to help bolster their chances to be one of those teams that make it into the college football playoff every year. So we'll discuss all those aspects for after this break. Stay right there.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Alabama and Ohio State are set to play a home-and-home series starting in 2027. Yeah, for 2027-2028, the school is announced on Thursday. The Buckeyes will host the first game in Columbus on September 18th, 2027, before traveling to Tuscaloosa the following season on September 9th, 2028. It will be the first time they have met outside of a neutral site game. The last time they faced each other was the 2015 Sugar Bowl, which Ohio State won 42-35. The announcement continues a recent run of future home-and-home series for Alabama, which for much of its time under Coach Nick Saban has scheduled its high-profile non-conference games at neutral sites. So, like I said, big step in direction for them, just because I know a lot of people like to talk about, they always play like a random cupcake school in the middle of their season, which sometimes they do, is what it is. But, also, just like home and home series are big in my opinion, especially when it goes to college sports, because it gives people a chance to bolster their resume, which is what I think you should be doing. And also, like I said, you don't get the comfort of a neutral site. Like you have to, again, you get the one game at home, which is cool, that works. But then you also get, like I said, the one game on the road, which can prove more. If you win in Columbus, that's a big deal. Just like for Ohio State's perspective, they win in Tuscaloosa, that's a big deal. I mean, we'll see. Well, let me backtrack on that. It is perceived to be a big deal now. We don't know how good these teams will be in 7-8 years, but assuming they're still in decent standing in terms of the hierarchy of college football, because they have been for some years now, then, like I said, that'll be an important game when it comes down the line to college football playoff rankings at the end of the season, potentially making it into the playoffs, or potentially missing the playoffs, if you, like I said, as opposed to not having those games. So, from Alabama's standpoint, 10 of Alabama's past 12 seasons have featured neutral site games. The Crimson Tide will open the 2020 season against USC in Arlington, Texas, and the next season will play Miami in Atlanta on September 4th, 2021. But starting in 2022-2023, things change with the home-and-home series against Texas, and their other home-and-home series include Wisconsin, Florida State, West Virginia, Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, Oklahoma, Arizona, and Virginia Tech, all spanning from 2023 to 2035, somewhere in between there. And then obviously, Ohio State slips into there a little bit too. So that was cool. Like I said, that's a good thing, potentially a good thing for college football, assuming both schools are still at the peak or near the peak of their powers. Because no offense to USC or to Miami, they're not necessarily on the same level as Alabama at this point in time. Granted, this could be a game to help get USC back on the map, or even get Miami back on the map if they win. But at this point in time, they're not the same level. Ohio State and Alabama, they're at the same level. Again, at least perception-wise. Well, not really perception-wise. I mean, they've both been in the playoffs a lot. They both won national championships recently, so let me not say just perception. In reality, they're at the same level. So, from that standpoint, this is probably one of the most I'm starting to say, because Texas is a big one. Oklahoma could be a big one in a couple of years. Florida State, too, if they're any good. Notre Dame, if they're any good. I mean, it's hard to say for certain who's going to be good and who's going to be bad in these different years because everything's a little bit different. But just assuming Ohio State and Alabama are still going to be good at that time, boom, that those are two good games. Those are two games that people are going to be tuned in for, especially to begin the season. That those are the kind of games you want to watch week 1, week 2, when everyone else is usually just playing like cupcakes or whatever. So, with that being said, like I'm thinking of some other universities that could think of doing something like this. Don't know who I would necessarily pair them up with per se, but just university that could use these type of high-profile games against big-time competition in other conferences early in their season to kind of help bolster their case for the college football playoff. And the first university that comes to mind when I think of that definitely is a Penn State, just because their out-of-conference schedule been very lackluster the last few years. I mean, like, they played Pitt a few times, which is whatever. I think they're playing, like, Virginia Tech this year, which is, again, not terrible, but not exactly in Alabama. So, and that was kind of the thing that hurt them beginning of the season, or, like, it's a couple years ago when they had their chance. They had that, like, wild run where they beat Ohio State on the block kick. Well, they didn't beat them on the block kick, but they blocked the kick returner for a touchdown that helped them win the game. Then went on that nice little run that ended up having them win the Big Ten championship. They eventually lost to USC in the Rose Bowl. I will contend that's still that's probably the best game I've ever seen Sam Darnold play in his life. I promise you, if you watched that game, you were like, oh, this guy's going to be a number 1 pick. And granted, he went with number 3, but I was like, that was the game where I'm like, oh, okay, like this guy's going to get drafted high. You just knew it. Some of the throws he made in that game were insane. I'd recommend all you guys watch the highlights. I mean, it was a great game back and forth. That's not the point. The point is, had Penn State, granted, their big out-of-conference game, they lost at Pitt, I'm pretty sure, and they ended up getting selected by Michigan that same year. But the point is that if they had another marquee win, maybe their chance of getting into the playoff is a little bit better. And that's the thing, and I mean, because it was hard to, could you schedule these things like as they can see with Alabama? You schedule these things years in advance. So you might have people on the non-conference schedule that you think are going to be good, and they end up not being good. And also, I guess no one really knew what Penn State football was going to look like at this time. Who knows what they would be like with all the whoever was taking over at post Paterno, Sandusky scandal stuff. How the program's going to look, even if there was going to be a program, honestly. So now that they realize that, like, all right, now is your time to kind of build these things out over the years, so that when it comes time, like, oh, this team is playing this game early in the season, that'll be big for their standing, or this team is playing this game early in the season, that's big. Just those kind of things. Penn State hasn't had that, but they've always been, like, right in consideration or near consideration for the Big Ten every season. And you also say, like, Wisconsin is kind of in the same boat with this, and I guess we'll get to them in a second, but they're a team that they don't really play, like, outside of having to play Ohio State and Michigan every year, which, I mean, even Michigan's a little hit or miss depending on the season. They haven't really been that great under Jim Harbaugh. Haven't been terrible, but haven't been, like, that great. But so, yes, their big game every year is Ohio State. So you win that, all right, you have a shot, but then, like, you're not facing, you're not going to be like a Clemson where they go undefeated every year, more or less. You're not going to be like an Alabama where they can afford a loss to a high-profile school and can still get in. Even Ohio State, if they lose to, like, Oklahoma, that's not going to, like, kill them like it did when Baker Mayfield beat them. Like, since they have other high-profile games, it's not going to kill them if they win out. With Penn State, they need to basically almost go undefeated to have a chance, because the rest of their schedule, outside of, again, just facing regular Big Ten teams, is not anything necessarily to write home about. So they're a team that could use this kind of thinking to where, like, hey, maybe we should schedule in who we think could be good down the line. In a similar vein, Pac-12 schools could also be doing this. I know Oregon's trying to do it. They did it with Auburn this past season. I know they're playing North Dakota State, who's an FCS school, but again, an FCS powerhouse. It's not like they're just anybody. They've won like 5 of the last 6 national championships, something like that. Their quarterback, Trey Lance, as I've talked about on this podcast, arguably could be the 3rd quarterback drafted next year. maybe even higher depending on how good his season was. He won 28 touchdowns, no picks, undefeated as a redshirt freshman. Big guy, strong, fast. I think he added at least it was over 10. I think something like 13, 14 touchdowns on the ground. This again has all the measurables, everything you would expect, and then again he has the pedigree because he's come from a program where all they do is win, basically the Alabama of the FCS, in my opinion. So they're facing them and Ohio State, I think, this season. So that's them trying to be like, hey, you win those 2 games, then all right, you might be onto something here. Or even if you lose one game randomly to the Arizona State like they did this past season, it's not going to kill you. You're not going to be out of the picture, kind of situation. So I would just go Pac-12 schools in general. I know other schools have tried. I know Washington's tried it a couple times, but I know UC, I guess, obviously is trying it this year when they play Alabama. But I think Pac-12 schools specifically, because no one really has a whole lot of respect for their program or their conference, I guess to say, when it comes to football. So you're going to need some of that extra stuff in these extra marquee games to have a chance to be in that conversation. Because even if you go have an undefeated, you need to basically go undefeated to be considered. If you have one loss, then they're going to put in maybe a one-loss Big Ten team or a one-loss SEC team in ahead of the Pac-12 team that only has one loss, just because that's the way their conference is perceived. So you're going to need some of these other games. I would say whoever, the Oregons, the USCs, the Utahs, the Washington, whoever considers themselves or wants to be at the top of that conference, they need to start scheduling some of these games. So it's good to see USC and Oregon doing that, at least this year. And we'll see what their schedules look like going forward. But like I said, Pac-12 schools as a whole need to start doing that. And I guess I mentioned Wisconsin. I'm going to touch on Clemson just a little bit, just because they could just to allow people to prove. I mean, they have a good pedigree. They've won national championships and stuff, so they don't need it as badly as some of these other schools. But at the same time, their 13-0 is different than an Alabama's 13-0 or an LSU's 13-0 or Ohio State's 13-0, because no one really respects their conference right now either. Now, if some of the other schools, the Florida States, the Miamis, get back to a credible level, then all right, that changes. Louisville, okay, then that changes some things. But until that happens, everyone just is like, oh, Clemson's going to go undefeated because they don't really play anybody out of conference. That's that scary. And then just win. So if you don't want to deal with that, because eventually your conference may get better, so Clemson could be a school that wants to schedule some of those games. Just give your schedule, give your record, I should say, more credibility. But also, like I mentioned earlier, Wisconsin's another school because, again, they play whoever wins the Big 12. I mean the Big 12. The Big 10, whoever wins the other side of the Big 10 in the championship, if they get there, obviously, there's no guarantee. But if they do get there, so that having to face an Ohio State or Michigan or Penn State, whoever, at least that gives you some credibility if you win that game. But outside of that side of the Big 10 doesn't really, again, have a whole lot of respect. Similar thing like a Georgia, but they don't need that because they play in Alabama or in LSU or wherever in the SEC championship game every year. So you don't need a big game because that's your big game. Wisconsin, they could use that, even though, again, the Ohio States or the Michigans, that's their big game. But if there's ever a down year in the Big 12 on that side of the conference, then you're in trouble. Because it's Wisconsin went undefeated, but who did they play because the Big 10 was down this year? If they don't have a big game. So kind of in the same degree as Penn State, where you're not assumed to be the cream of the crop in your own conference. All right, maybe you need to schedule. I'm not saying you have to schedule Alabama, but you need to schedule good out-of-conference teams. And I guess, they are scheduling Alabama in, 2024, 2025. So a few years down the line. So, hey, if Wisconsin's good and Alabama's still good, all right, that's a marquee game, or that's a marquee home-and-home series for them, because that's a good chance for them to put themselves in that pedigree, potentially. So like I said, it'd just be cool to see, and I mean, these aren't the only schools that could maybe use stuff like that. I imagine I could have found one school from the Big 12, but I know the Oklahomas, the Texas, they try to do a little something. Normally neutral site, but I like these. I would, on all these cases, I'm talking about a home and home series, not just a neutral site game, because again, going into a hostile environment and winning is bigger to me, though I'm not a voter, but it's bigger to me than just going to a neutral site game, because that neutral site, if your fans travel better, then it's basically another home game for you. So that's not really. It's just a different stadium. That's all. You're just not familiar with it. But like I said, going into an environment like when, I mean, did Baker need to plant the flag and everything? Maybe not. But going into Ohio State and winning early in the year, that's a big deal to a lot of people. Like that was a big deal when it happened, as it should have been. Like I said, if USC, well, no, because the USC game is in neutral site. That's in Texas, and the Miami game's in Atlanta. But like when Texas plays them in the home and home series in 2022, 2023, if they go into Tuscaloosa and win, that's a big deal. May not be as big of a deal from Alabama because they're perceived to be better, but it's like you get the point where if you're going into that environment and winning a game is bigger to me than winning it on a neutral site, and I think it's going to be that same way for a lot of fans and voters and stuff like that. So, like I said, it's good to see. Hopefully, you can keep these things coming in different conferences because that's what I like to see. I just want to see competitive football. That's all. That's all I want. That is all I want. That is my critique of how teams set up their schedule. And speaking of critiques, there have been, as we've been discussing, there have been some rather, in my opinion, hostile critiques of Kyrie Irving coming from the media. So we're going to discuss a couple in particular, and also just the way in which media covers basketball, but also covers sports in general, and kind of how we can fix some of that. So these critiques are a little bit more tailored and respectful, as opposed to just kind of hot take-ish. Or just misunderstanding, as we will discuss. So we'll talk about that right after the break. Stay right there.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
So, one of the harshest critics of Kyrie Irving recently, at least, I mean, there's been a good amount of them. One of the harshest critics for Kyrie Irving has been Kendrick Perkins. Now, he's had a lot to say basically since the whole thing came out about Kyrie wanting to wanted the players not to go down to New Orlando and play. And he talked about the story about how he wanted to go down to Orlando, but the team won't let him, and that's why he's all about this. Which no, there's no way to prove that because again, Kyrie. This is my one problem with all the critiques around Kyrie is it's just all hearsay or things he said on the call or things he maybe said in a group chat or maybe didn't say. Kyrie has expressed some things on social media, mainly Instagram, but it's not like he's out here doing interviews and people are critiquing his words from interviews. They're just literally just taking things he may or may not have said in calls or in different things, and they're just using that to bash him, which is, in my opinion, unfair. You don't even know if those were his exact words or if they're the context of them. You can't just take a sentence that Woj or Sham somebody tweets out without giving the whole context of it, unless you have a full transcript of it so you can read it. If you can pick and choose any one quote from a video or from a conversation, and that could be the big thing. But again, that's not my main point. So Kendrick Perkins had a lot of things to say. He talked about how how Kyrie's been a distraction. He's been one of the main causes. And how he has no plan for what he wants. Blah blah blah. He talked about how if you put his brain in a bird, it would fly backwards. All he's doing is creating dividend. That was disrespectful, but that's neither here nor there. I guess actually it is here because that was disrespectful. With the whole bird thing. Also, like, again, the whole distraction stuff. He tweeted out about how he took it light on Kyrie, because this was yesterday when he made some of these comments, how he took it light on Kyrie when he could expose some of the BS that that's been really going on some of these phone conversations, which, in fairness, I don't think Kendrick Perkins is like privy to. He's getting like secondhand information. But hey, that's neither here nor is it there. But my main point is that like he's been attacking him for like what reason? Like what reason? Oh, the similar thing that he's done, or that similar thing that he did to KD, and obviously was more accepted back in the day because like KD, like everyone kind of, not everyone, but a lot of people hated on the move to the Warriors. I know I did at the time. I've gotten over it. It is what it is at this point. He's on a different team. I could care less. But a lot of people still attack him, and they've continued to attack him, or they continue to critique him, or be harshly critical of him, or even sometimes even disrespectful towards him in different ways. And Kendrick Perkins has been one of those players, especially, and it's weirder from him because he was actually a teammate of him, and I think he was. I'm trying to think if he got to Cleveland before or after Kyrie left. I don't know. Hold on. I gotta look that up because he might have also been in Cleveland with Kyrie Irving, which again makes this thing even more weird because it's like, hey, if you're teammates with a guy, I imagine you have his phone number or can get his phone number. Just talk to the man. Oh yeah, no, he was in Cleveland with Kyrie. At least the first year, 2014, 2015. Yeah, that was the first championship. Well, the first finals round. He was still on that team. So yeah, he was there. I mean, he could have easily talked to him then. Or, not easily talked to him, but that means he has his number. He could have easily reached out to him or said something to him. He chose not to. Teach his own. And obviously the second time he was on the Cavs, Kyrie had already been traded to Boston. It was just weird, some of the personal attacks of him. I mean, and granted, he even got some retaliation from KD, and I don't think it's just because, as Stephen A. said, it's not just because Kyrie is his teammate, like also he's attacked KD personally for different reasons. I mean, again, you're allowed to disagree, you're allowed to have your opinions, but like, again, to be disrespectful about it seems unnecessary. Like, you can critique your opinions. Like, I know a lot of people had different debates. I know Matt Barnes didn't agree with everything that he said. But he was respectful about it. He just said, like, hey, look, I've heard some things, but he wasn't, like, outwardly attacking him, per se. And also Steven Jackson had to refute some of those things when they were on, I guess, FaceTime or Zoom or whatever. This thing was FaceTime. They normally have a podcast together, but obviously they can't do that now with the Rona. Well, I mean, I guess technically they could. I've seen some people in studios to do podcasts, but they just chose not to. It is what it is. Yeah, so Steven Jackson had to defend him and stuff like that, but what Matt Barnes said wasn't disrespectful. You've seen other people, like, critique some of his plan, or like Garrett Temple's come out and said, like, different things. Austin Rivers has said different things about Kyrie's plan, but they did it in a way that was respectful. Like, you can critique somebody without being disrespectful, and I feel like Kendrick Perkins, his whole thing is just to try to be hot takey, or try to be like, or try to create viral moments to try to get himself further along in his career. And I'm not to say he's the only person to do that, because a lot of people have done that and become successful on it. But that's just the way it seems like that's what he's going for at this time. He doesn't have to be like that. These are guys you've played with. You don't have to attack them so hard, especially in ways where you could just easily talk to them off camera. Not to say that you can't have disagreements with them or dispute what they say or the way that their actions, but that isn't. You can also have these conversations in person or on the phone. Not in person now, but on the phone with these people. Like, there's no need to take it there. Although that was kind of weird. Also, and to another sense, Stephen A. was another one that was very critical of Kyrie, saying they had no plan. Also, he was talking about how, like, the NBA has done so much for the black community. Very Dabo Sweeney of him. In terms of, like, Dabo Sweeney and his kind of comment about all the race that was going on and all the stuff that had come out about the program. He's saying, like, how much wealth and how much he's provided for the black community. Granted, people took up for him because he's a likable guy, but that's just an unnecessary point to make. And so that was Stephen A's point too, and he was like, oh, there's been these issues with black coaches or black front office execs, or not being enough of them. Like, why all of a sudden are you, like, talking about it now when you weren't talking about it before, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, even if that's fair, I mean, again, I don't think that's completely true. I don't think no one was saying anything. I mean, LeBron and D-Wade vouched for Fizdale to get a job in Memphis. Like, so it's not like they haven't spoken up for people that when they feel the need to speak up. But it's like, now is a different time. So you can use that power in this time to create real change in this league. And however you want to use that change. And now, again, they don't need to kind of lay out their plan for us. Because I know that was one of the things he was critical of the Players Coalition and Kyrie's plan and stuff. No, like, that's not a thing that, like, they need to lay it out for the league and have their plan. They don't need to run the plan by us to make sure we're okay with it. But also, like, this idea that, like, oh, just because the league has been so good to them or good to the black community doesn't mean that it does need fixing. Like a lot, I mean, in the country, unless you're a criminal, shout out the 13th Amendment, like, everyone's free, technically. Okay, like, that's great. Like, people, again, unless you're a criminal or commit a criminal act, you can't be enslaved. But, like, that doesn't mean that, like, everything just right in the world. Like, oh, yeah, America's right now because there's, like, no slavery. Like, people try to make that point. And I'm like, that's not the same thing. That doesn't mean that. And like I said, just because the NBA has utilized black players to elevate themselves and make athletes a lot of money, but also make the owners and the executives and commissioners a lot of money as well, it doesn't mean everything's perfect. Same thing with the NFL. NFL's provided for a lot of jobs and a lot of opportunity for African Americans in this country. That doesn't mean that things don't need to be fixed. It doesn't mean that there still doesn't need to be more head coaches, black head coaches. It doesn't mean there still doesn't need to be more black GMs and front office people. It doesn't mean there still needs to be more black quarterbacks in the league. Like, I mean, there's more now than there really... I mean, I don't want to say ever was because I haven't been watching football since its inception, but there's some very prominent ones now, but that's not the point. Things can still get better. And now is the opportunity for players to utilize their power and come together to make that change. I didn't understand Stephen A. Smith's critique of that because it was just weird. Because I'm like, all right, so the league's been good to the African American community. Great. Like that, so that just means they deserve a round of applause, a pat on the back. Like, no, like there's still things that they can do and things that they can help with and things that they can help fight that they hadn't been doing. But like I said, everything can be improved upon. That this isn't like just like, oh, everything's great. Like, again, things are great, but there's still things that need to be done. And I found it unfair where he was like, oh, they weren't talking about this before, blah blah blah. This wasn't an issue to them before. Like, that isn't. Just as someone, and this kind of applies to everything that's been going on, just because someone doesn't speak about it does not mean it's not an issue to them. Maybe it's an issue internally, maybe it's an issue that they express, like I said, to teammates or coaches or different things, like, hey, this isn't right. But just because they're not publicly saying it doesn't mean that they don't feel the same way. Like, you need someone to put a tweet out or put out an Instagram post to feel that same way. Or maybe, in some cases, people have been enlightened and realized, like, oh, I have more power than I thought I did. Because obviously, there's only a certain number of players really that can have real sway in the league, in my opinion. But like, maybe now they've realized, like, oh, if a bunch of us come together for a cause or for an issue, we have a lot more power than we thought. And I think that's what players are realizing now. So if they realize that, then why is it bad for them to start speaking out about it now and making sure changes are put in place now? That doesn't seem like an issue. But again, Stephen A. was trying to talk down on the players and badmouth the players and saying all these things, and I'm like, for what? Like, what good does that do? Talk about distraction. Like, what good does that do? Just being like, hey, y'all should have been. Why y'all talking about it now? Why shouldn't they be talking about it now? You would prefer them not say. I mean, he kind of clarified that he's happy that they're saying stuff, but I'm like, all right, then just end of sentence, end of statement. That's all you have to say. I'm glad players are speaking up about it now. If you're mad at them for not speaking about it before, just be glad they're speaking up about it now. And also, he was critiquing KD for calling Kendrick Perkins a sellout, which, I mean, different. You didn't have to use that term, but I get his point. He's attacked KD on multiple occasions. There's no way him and Kendrick Perkins are good on a personal level. There's no way. All the harsh critiques he's had, not even just like critiques. I mean, you can be critical of a guy's play, but it's the attacks on his character. There's no way he's more than willing to say that. And I think you look at other guys like that critique games, like Paul Pierce says a lot about outlandish things. He doesn't like, even he has his biases, but he's not disrespectful. Chauncey Billups not disrespectful. Jalen Rose not disrespectful. Chuck and Shaq maybe a little bit disrespectful, depending on what they're talking about. But that's just who they are. Like that's their whole thing. That's not Kendrick Perkins' thing. He just picks people that are easy to attack in the public eye. And I'm like, that doesn't. Now you get no points from that for me. So I was happy for KD clapback, but again, it's just like Stephen A. is mad at KD for calling him that. When I'm like, you should be mad at Kendrick Perkins saying that if you put Kyrie Irving's brain in a bird, it's going to fly backwards. Like, what does that? Like, what? Like, how do you say that about someone that was your teammate like that? That's why I can see him calling him a stud. It's like, look, you on our side now. All of a sudden, you're on the media side now. You're switching your tone. And I see it being a little interesting. But that kind of leads to this last little thing I'm going to say is that actually, you know what I was going to talk about. We'll save that for another topic because I don't want to have this topic go too long. I think that's a good one, and I think it deserves more than like a couple-minute discussion. So we'll save that for the next episode. I won't even tell you what it is. Keep you guys in suspense. But yeah, so after we come back here for the last segment, we're gonna discuss receivers in the NFL, and I know we've discussed receivers at different points throughout the NFL, top 5 receivers and stuff like that. But instead of ranking them like that, we're going to rank them by division. So I'm not going to go through all 8 divisions because like that would be too long. But I'm going to rank my top 4 the divisions by the number 1 receivers on each of the teams in those divisions. So hopefully I explained that enough. I'll try to explain it again when we come back. But hopefully that makes sense. So best division best division based on their number 1 receiver on each team. Like I said, hopefully that makes sense. I know it'll make sense when I start explaining it, but yeah. So we'll talk about that right after the break. Stay right there.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and One Championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
I'm going to go through all 8 of the divisions. Look at, well, I've already done it, but looked at all the teams' number 1 receivers. I mean, some teams it's kind of hard because they have 2 guys that with no like clear number 1. Like if you're talking about like NFC West, for example, like Debo would probably be their number 1, but now he's hurt, so don't know how that's going to go. Seahawks, it's like maybe it's technically it's Tyler Lockett or maybe it's DK Metcalf. Rams, it's like maybe it's Cooper Kupp or maybe it's Robert Woods. Like some teams, not every team is like a very clear cut number 1. But even with that, I'm going to go through and I'm just going to do the top 4 in my opinion. And like I said, go look at it. Look at every team, all 32 teams. Look at who their top receiver is, or should be, or potentially will be heading into the season, and then collectively combine that up and see which divisions have the best like group of number 1 receivers. And like I said, I'm going to rank the top 4. So the first one should be pretty obvious to everybody. It's the NFC South. Obviously, when you have Michael Thomas, Julio Jones, Chris Godwin / Mike Evans, and DJ Moore all in the same division, that makes it a little bit harder for anyone else to compete with them, in my opinion. I mean, I think that's probably going to be pretty standard around the league, or in terms of people's opinions on it, just because those are. I mean, you have at least the top two, if not two of the top three receivers. When you talk about Julio Jones and Michael Thomas, and then like I said, you got Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, who are at least in the top 10, and DJ Moore, who's a younger guy but could easily be a guy that makes it inches closer to that top 10 list sooner rather than later. So I think, in my opinion, that's a pretty clear and easy one when it comes to division. So I don't have to talk too much more about that. But now, this is where it gets interesting. So, my number 2 is going to be the AFC West. Which, I mean, it may surprise some people, maybe it won't. Because you'll see who I put at number 3, and they could have easily been number 2. But with the AFC West, you got Keenan Allen in the division. And also, again, you got Mike Williams, but you got Keenan Allen. You got Tyreek Hill. You got Cortland Sutton. And I guess you have whoever the Raiders have, whether it's Tyrell Williams or Henry Ruggs or whoever their number 1 turns out to be this year. But when you look at, like I said, Tyreek Hill, Keenan Allen, Cortland Sutton, those top 3 right there can match up with almost anybody's top 3. And actually, you know what? Now I think about it, scratch that. I'm gonna drop them down to 3. I'm gonna switch 2 and 3 because my number 3 was the NFC North. And now I think about it, the NFC North has 4 clear-cut number 1s, and with the Raiders being out there, even though they're top 3, again, I would stack up against a lot of divisions top 3. It's the lack of the 4th, where, like I said, you look through the NFC North, you have Devontae Adams, you have Allen Robinson, you have Adam Thielen, and you have Kenny Golladay. That's 4 very, very, very solid names. It's going to be hard for, again, a lot of divisions to compete with. Some divisions have 1, some divisions have 2 potentially, but there's not that many divisions that have 4 solid names like that. So, like I said, like Devontae Adams, top 5, top 10 receiver. Kenny Golladay could be a top 10. Adam Thielen's been a top 10 receiver in this league. And Allen Robinson, he hasn't had the quarterback, but he's had the production on his own to warrant being in a top 15, top 20 discussion at the very least. He's one of the more underrated receivers, in my opinion. That's without my Penn State bias goggles on. Like, even outside of that, if you just look at him objectively as a receiver and the quarterbacks he had to deal with over the course of his career, you could definitely say he's one of the more underrated guys. Because most people, when you think about the best receivers, they're not going to put him in the top 10 or anything, but like, he's one of the guys that people are like, oh, I didn't even, like, you don't even think about him as being like one of the better receivers in this league, which is unfortunate to him. But like when you look at, I'm going to run through his stats real quick. I know I've already gone through his stats in the past, but like I said, he had his second year in the league, he had 1,400 yards and 14 touchdowns. Like, and that's what Blake Bortles throwing the ball. This past year, he had almost 100 catches, 11, 47, and 7 touchdowns. Again, with Mitch and Chase Daniel and like Mitch, like I said, there's like in theory, Nick Foles may very well be the best quarterback he's ever played with, which is saying a lot. Not that Nick Foles isn't solid on his good days, but with Nick Foles the best quarterback you played with in your career, that says a lot about the talent of quarterback you played with over the course of your career. Nick Foles isn't like a top 15 quarterback in the league. Like, maybe he's top 15 at best, but I don't even that's kind of pushing it. So, I said that's the best guy he will have played with over the course of his career. So that just tells you the situation he's been in. But yeah, so then I think the NFC North is probably solid too. So I'll go back. The AFC West is 3 now. So, like I said, you got Tyreek Hill, Cortland Sutton, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. Solid 3s you can get. Tyreek Hill was in my top 5 receivers I did a few episodes ago, if I remember correctly. Cortland Sutton is a guy that could very well be in top 10s this coming season, depending on, again, how him and Drew Lock continue to grow their connection, because you never know. Who else? Like I said, Keenan Allen, what was I saying? Been one of the most consistent, one of the best receivers, even though he plays in We played in San Diego, then now he's playing in Los Angeles, and no one really cares about the Chargers. His numbers are exceptional, year in and year out. It's not, like I said, it's not his fault. He's put up 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons, multiple 100-catch seasons. Even the one year he didn't have 100 catches in 2018, he had 97. His touchdowns are not really where they need to be, but in his really only 6 years, so the 1 year he missed because I think he tore his ACL or something, he got hurt. Only played 1 game. He's had 4 1,000-yard seasons in his 6 seasons in his career. And, like I said, over 100 catches in 2 of them. One of the best route runners in the league. His release and his footwork is crazy. So, another one of the underrated guys. But, yes, I think that's a solid 3rd, in my opinion. Then you go to the 4th. Like I said, the 4th and the 5th, and as you go down, it gets so interesting because we'll have a little bit of debate about this one live on the air. So then you're talking about, so I haven't mentioned the AFC North yet, but that's because you got Baltimore, who knows who their number one. I mean, Hollywood Browns probably number 1, but you got Seymour. Juju. 2 years ago, the AFC North would have been a lot higher on this list, but because his numbers are down, again, you still have Odell and Jarvis, still both great guys. And then Bengals, you got AJ Green, who's not bad. I mean, obviously not bad. He's very good, but he's been hurt, so you don't know what he looks like. T. Higgins, you don't know what he's going to look like yet. Tyler Boyd's a solid receiver, but nothing too crazy. So I think it's just mainly the Ravens bring it down, and like I said, you gotta hope Juju bounces back, and you gotta hope Tyler Boyd can continue or AJ Green can bounce back. There's too many question marks. AFC East, you got Julian Edelman, you got Stephon Diggs now, that helps. You got Devontae Adams. Then the Jets, their number 1 is Brashad Perriman, Jamison Crowder, maybe Denzel Mims, you really don't know. Texans, AFC South, you got Texans, Brandon Cooks, which isn't bad, but again, not DeAndre Hopkins. Titans, you got A.J. Brown, solid, but again, still only a rookie, you got to see it again. T.Y. Hilton for the Colts, very solid, but he's been a little up and down, just because of the injuries and stuff. Not up and down, he hasn't always been able to stay on the field, which is unfortunate. And then Jaguars probably DJ Chark, but again, we really don't know for certain with them. Who else? Then you got the NFC East. Eagles, don't know at all. Probably Deshaun, but who really knows at this point? Cowboys, Amari Cooper, great. Washington, T.J. McLaurin, very solid, but again, only a rookie. And Giants, Golden Tate, Slayton, I don't know. Again, their trio is solid, but for a number 1, their number 1 is worse than a lot of teams' number 1. So that's kind of where it drops down for them. And this division, the division I have in 4th, personally, again, you guys can agree to disagree on this, but the division I have in 4th is greatly helped by having DeAndre Hopkins in that division. Because without DeAndre Hopkins, NFC North, NFC West is definitely closer to the bottom. But now when you have DeAndre Hopkins on the Cardinals, very solid. You got, again, like I said, a top 2-3 receiver in the league that boosts up your division ranking a great deal. You got the Rams, who have either Cooper Kupp, who's solid, or Robert Woods, both very solid receivers. You got Seahawks with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, whoever that you want to claim as the number 1, both very solid. And then Debo, who is probably going to be all right by early in the season at the very least. I mean, again, I know he's only going to be a rookie, but he's been solid. And then they drafted Brandon Ayuk from Arizona State, and just obviously you have to have faith in Kyle Shanahan as a play caller, because then even with Debo Samuel, he used to play in 15 games, only started 11, and he still had 57 catches for 800 yards and 3 touchdowns, while also rushing for 3 touchdowns. And again, obviously receiving is not rushing, but in theory, if he was healthy, that's a very solid trio. Now, again, if he's not healthy, then that drops things down. If he was out for the year, but since he's probably going to play this season, the timetable has been all over the place. I heard 10 weeks. Some people say 12 to 15. It all depends. And again, it's a foot, so you really don't know how they're going to come back from it. I think it was a Jones fracture, I think they said. But if he's healthy enough to play throughout the season, I mean, he's, again, not the best guy in terms of, like he's not going to be, like, a top 10 guy, but in that lower tier, he's a high-level mid-tier guy, or high-level mid-tier potential, and I'm, like, in my opinion, just because his run at the catch ability in that San Francisco offense matters a lot to me. And again, he's a rookie, so it's hard for you to say. So maybe you could argue, like, oh, maybe, I don't know. The only other division I think probably could have gotten it over them is probably, I don't know. Like, maybe, no. I feel confident in that. No, like I was trying to make excuses. I would say, the AFC North, you got Odell and Juju, but, like, the other two teams, you don't really know who their number ones are going to be. So that kind of clouds some things. And granted, the Ravens may not need number one, but still, it's based on this ranking. So I'm going to stick with my pick with the NFC West, just because their other three are good enough, I think, to carry them. Even if you just have Debo or Brandon Ayuk or whoever they have, Kendrick Bourne, obviously no Emmanuel Sanders this year. Or even, I'm trying to think who else they might implement there. No, I think it's probably going to be those top. They're probably going to be the top three guys. But again, you're Kyle Shanahan and Cardinal plays. That matters to me. It may not matter to everyone. That don't matter to me, and that helped me again raise their stock in these rankings. So those are my top four: NFC South, obviously, NFC North, AFC West. Though 2 and 3, like I said, I flipped them literally on the air, so those are debatable. And then the NFC West would come in at 4th, and then, like I said, every other division's probably is somewhere in between there. You guys can debate that, or even, I think that I didn't want to make this segment too long, so I didn't want to go into all the divisions. But let's take my top 4. You guys can agree, you can disagree. I think we'll all agree with the first one, but from there, you guys have different opinions. I would love to hear them, love to debate them with you guys, love to discuss them, all that stuff. So if you want to do that, find us on social media. We are there: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We can talk about this. We can talk about how you think the media critiques players, and if they do it fairly or unfairly, or in a respectful or disrespectful way. You can talk about when you think the MLB will be able, or the two sides in the MLB negotiations will be able to come to some sort of an agreement, because, I mean, at this point, it's crazy that they haven't. You can talk about Jamal Adams, where you think he'll end up, or even maybe you don't think he'll be traded at all. All those things I would love to discuss with all of you guys. But that'll do it for me here today on the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by GSMC Podcast Network. I want to thank you guys for listening. If you like what you've heard today, like what you've heard on past episodes, please subscribe to the podcast. Please make sure you never miss an episode. Please make sure you're always on top when we drop our latest stuff. Also, if you could, please as well, give us a 5-star rating, write us a review. It'd be very appreciated. Well, on whatever platform or whatever service you choose to listen to these podcasts on. Also, as I've been saying throughout this, I try to make sure to give a shout out to the essential workers. So the people that have been working hard throughout this pandemic, they weren't able to work from home. They luckily still had their jobs, because again, a lot of people were out of work. So I want to make note of that. But like I said, doctors, nurses, delivery store people, the grocery store workers, I keep saying delivery store people, delivery drivers, the Amazons, the FedExes, the mail, UPS, like I said, grocery store workers, all those people that have had to continue to work throughout this pandemic, even trying to keep themselves safe so that everyone else can stay safe and they can do their thing. Even though not everybody's taking it as seriously as they should be, but hey, it is what it is. We will try to work through that. One day maybe we'll get it. Maybe, probably won't, but it is what it is. But yeah, shout out to you guys, any other essential workers or any other workers that have been deemed essential. If I missed you, I apologize. But just want to say, give you guys a shout out. I know, like I said, I'll continue to do that. Also, I know there's still been more stuff to protest about, so if you're protesting, like I said, just make sure you protect yourself, wear a mask, social distance when you can. I mean, you're outside, so it is what it is. But if you're wearing a mask, that at least is a big help. Also, I want to remind everyone that the murderers of Breonna Taylor are still out there on the loose. There's still an investigation going on, but it doesn't seem like it's looking that good in terms of them getting charged with anything, because The issue is that there was no video because they turned off their body cams, but here's what it is. So yeah, just like I said, just keep fighting the good fight. If you're in Louisville or you're in Kentucky and you're hearing this, like I said, call up your governors, attorney generals, whoever. Make sure that she gets some sort of justice. This doesn't seem right just because there isn't a video of it. That means, oh, okay, we're going to act like it didn't happen. Because it did. She's now dead. And she was shot 8 times in her bed for no apparent reason because they were in the wrong house. So, yeah. Just remember that. Breonna Taylor's killer is still on the loose. That's not right. But yeah, that'll do it for me here today. I've been Chris Blades. That has been my time. And until next time, peace out.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.